I'm so excited about today's class. So the last class that I taught about feminine and masculine energy as it pertains to your business really took off. There was so many of you who received so much clarity and understanding about how to position yourself within your own power. And so I decided that this would be my next topic for this week. So if you are, interested in this topic, if you feel like, oh my gosh, like I have actually spotted this in myself, I've actually spotted this in my own clients, I've spotted this in a friend, I've spotted this in other women that I'm surrounded by, please grab a journal, get yourself comfortable, grab a cup of tea with me. I'm so excited about this. I feel like this is probably one of the most incredible topics that we can really position, into conversation. I feel like there's not enough conversations around this, and very often it's just because it just slips by. We don't even notice, we don't even realize. And when we do realize it, often it's already way too late, or we don't know how to navigate through this. And so I really want to come in and speak about why women delay help, why we delay help and support, why we delay the things that are actually good for us, right? That could really support us to have better lives, to have, more fulfilling lives. And one of these topics really showed up for me when I was still quite young, when I was leading myself, through a life of depression, and, I wasn't very well. I was entangled in a toxic relationship dynamic. And today I realized that this was what actually had been happening. I had been delaying support and help. I had, postponed it to later. And I didn't even realize at the time that this subliminal mechanism was actually sabotaging, was a sabotage mechanism, right? It was actually a way for me to avoid something, right? To avoid the pain in some way. But what actually ended up happening is I actually ended up re-traumatizing myself. And this very act, actually, this very thing that that was occurring to me was actually stemming from unresolved trauma. And I will come into that, as we go through the class. But the reason why this really showed up, as a topic in the past few weeks is, because I've noticed that some women have been in my surroundings for such a long time, and I know I can support them. And you probably have felt this as well. You probably have women in your field, right, who you can support this woman. You could offer help, you could offer advice, and yet they don't step up. And it really, was something that I became so curious about, specifically women who had been, orbiting in my field for many, many years. And there was this moment, even, women who would come into sales calls. I don't really do sales calls anymore, but even back then they would come into sales calls. They knew there was this issue that they were having, and yet they weren't saying yes to stepping fully into the container. And some of these women actually came back after many years, and they kept saying things to me like, oh my gosh, Lizzie, I wish that time when we spoke we actually had done the work. I wish that back then I would just have said yes, and I would have trusted, because I knew back then already that you were the one that could really help me out through this situation. And I remember, what it felt like to be standing in front of that very decision for myself, right? When my brother back then really said to me, like, Lizzie, I feel like you really need professional support, right? I don't feel like that's something that I can actually help you with, but I feel that you need somebody to support you through this, right? And I literally delayed it for probably 2 years. I actually denied it. I was like, no, I'll be fine. I'll deal with this on my own. And today, what I really want to come and speak to you about were actually these 5 emotions or 5 red flags, right? That are probably a sign that, you or another woman who you are surrounded by is actually going through her very own sabotage mechanism. And, why does this show up? It's very clear and obvious. If you've done some trauma informed education, you probably know this already. But I just want to bring this forward because I feel that some of you might really benefit from this. Whether it's you personally benefiting from this information or a woman in your surrounding benefiting from this information, I really want this conversation to allow us to be, truthful and right, and, to really express what is actually going on, right? And that we can have these conversations, we can have these open gateways where women can actually realize, oh my goodness, like, what is actually happening here is I'm actually sabotaging. I'm sabotaging the wealth that can be available to me. I'm sabotaging the health that can be available to me. I'm sabotaging the love that can be available to me. And I'm sabotaging the success that is ultimately my birthright, right? It's our birthright to live lives of fulfillment and joy and pleasure, right? I'm not saying that you have to be spending all of your life in that emotion. But if you're experiencing more than, 50% of your life right now, if your clients or any other woman is experiencing more than 50% of her time wailing in toxic dynamics with, herself or the people around her, then she's actually deactivating her soul purpose on some level. See, she's sabotaging the true brilliance and the true zone of genius that is wanting to come through her. And I feel this is so important to bring this topic up to conversation because more than ever, women have so much access to information. They have so much access to education, right? We have access to having conversations globally. Like even this conversation we're having now is occurring on a global scale. Like you're all from different countries, right? From even different continents. And I feel it's so important for us to really have intelligent conversations around this topic. And not only that we can support ourselves to accessing higher gateways of really aligning with our soul purpose, but that we can also, have conversations, empowering conversations with other women around this subject. Because at the end of the day, every single woman on this planet who really taps into her zone of genius and her soul's brilliance is actually capable of uplifting a whole community, right? And it's so important for us to also walk in our power and to own that power. And one of these, we can't access power just out of sitting on a beautiful field of flowers, although, that's really nice. But our power really comes from excavating and transmuting the pain that we've endured and the trauma that we've endured, and actually going deep into it and excavating it and liberating ourselves from it. And this is something that I really stand for so fervently, and so I have so much inspiration for this because I'm like feeling all the feels. But honestly, I really feel that if you're in this community of women, you most likely have a connection with your soul purpose already, even though you might not even be aware of it yet. And if you are, it's definitely your birthright to access that, right? And one of the ways on which we can really access the power of our birthright, of our soul's purpose, right, is really through accessing strategies and coping mechanisms that don't further traumatize ourselves, don't further push us down, into the abyss of wounding. Right? It's really about bringing it up to the surface. And very often we can't really do this alone. And, if we're trying to do something completely on our own, most likely we're actually operating from trauma. So I want to bring up 5 emotions and why they, occur and what really is active. And it's very often, I just want you to really lean back here. You can be taking some notes, but I want you to just lean back and zoom out of your own life, zoom out of, the entanglement that you might be feeling with the woman that you really want to help, right? one of the things that very often comes up, and this is something that really, showed up for me as well, is actually shame. And one of the things that, I will just share a little bit of my personal story as well, is that I knew as a child that there were some things occurring in my household that were dysfunctional, right? It's very clear. And as children, we often understand this. We understand that there's pieces we can reveal about our family life to the outer world, and there's other pieces where we know that if other people knew about this, we would feel deeply embarrassed. And this shame can sometimes run so subliminally that we don't even clock with this. So for me, when I was entangled in that toxic dynamic, I was actually deeply embarrassed. In the beginning, I was deeply embarrassed about even being in this situation. And when the time went by, I became, I started to feel embarrassed about even staying in that situation for so long, right? And the mere fact to actually step into the decision of receiving help and support would actually also mean that I would have to be willing to look at this shame. I would have to be willing to look at the embarrassment that I was feeling. So if you're feeling a level of shame or embarrassment about the life that you're living at the moment, or the things that you're experiencing, or anything that you feel is just so shameful that if you revealed it to someone, you would just be literally like melting alive into the ground. That's most likely a sign that you're actually subliminally sabotaging the level of wealth, health, love, success that you really deserve, right? And one of these things really showed up, with some clients sometimes, where, the level of shame that really was coming up to the surface, sometimes only, 3 or 4 sessions in, was, that they actually had been abused in the past, or they had, cheated on their partners, or they had, not revealed the full identity of who they were to their new love partners, right? And even sometimes to concealing sexually transmittable diseases, right? Like, and that, these were heart-centered women. They were just beautiful, gorgeous women, but something in themselves told themselves that it wasn't okay to reveal that kind of stuff, right? And very often it would only show up, a couple of sessions in, when they already had built a certain level of trust and rapport with me, so that it would then come up to the surface. But if you have something in your life, or if you know about a woman who might have had, dysfunctional traits or behavior patterns, right? There's a high chance that, that level of shame and embarrassment is actually coming up as a level of concealing what actually happened, right? And this often comes from the fact that we don't feel that we are, inherently safe, within our own family constellation. So for me specifically, it was that, there's just some things that we don't say outside. And sometimes, my parents would also install that. And, I understand why parents sometimes do it, because of course, you can't, it's not about, revealing every single thing that you are to anyone. But there's also a level where that shame and embarrassment, gets passed down to us without there even being any kind of words, right? So yeah, I just want you to sit with this and, how was your upbringing? Was there parts in your family constellation that was kind of like shushed in front of other people, where, I know very often we were in deep conflict with one another, and then we had, for example, family coming over to visit, and it was like all the Haley, Healy, Oli, everything was great, right? And I knew deep down there was, wait, we're actually just putting up a show here. So that means we can't actually reveal who we really are. What? Okay, so let me just hide that away. So this is how sometimes we just subliminally program ourselves to, this way of operating in the world where, there's something that we're feeling deeply embarrassed and ashamed of, and we're not revealing it, right? And I'm not saying this, I want to say this as well. about. It's not about going out on social media and blurting it out into the open. This is about choosing sacred container space for you so that you can unravel and unleash this in a safe and supported way, right? Because what I also sometimes see on social media is women literally shedding their hearts out, in groups and things like that. And I sometimes don't think that that's the best way to operate it. So just be mindful of that as well, of like completely exposing yourself and, the whole shameless revolution and unapologetic revolution, that sometimes can be toxic as well. Because if you haven't actually processed this deep shame and embarrassment in a safely held container, it can actually also be like re-traumatizing, because you're actually flaring up and you're dancing with other people's rescuer syndrome. And I'm going to come to the rescue syndrome in a moment. Okay, so another thing that often comes up as very often is because you're actually from very young, we were considered as the leaders, the caretakers, the responsible girls, right? The good girls. We are the ones that our parents can rely on, right? Even if it's just that they can rely on us, that we will have good grades in school, there's already some kind of pressure that we accept as being the status quo normal. And so what this often leads us into is this whole mechanism and this whole belief system that we have to be strong. We have to lead ourselves. We have to be the ones taking care of everybody else, of making sure that everybody is safe, right? That everyone is catered for and nurtured and supported, but not us, right? We are not allowed to feel weak. We're not allowed to break. We're not allowed to, be vulnerable. And this is something that really showed up for me in most of my 20s, which is probably also why I delayed receiving, right? Because when we're in this forward masculine energy, and if you've watched my other video about the feminine masculine dynamic, this will make even more sense to you. But this forward masculine energy is really a way for us to be in charge, to be the leaders of our own lives, to be the caretakers. And very often we have built it to such a strength and stamina that forward motion of energy is not allowing us to do the other way around. So this means that we can't actually, it's not that we can't, but we don't know how to access receiving in a healthy manner. We haven't learned how to process the dynamic of receiving help without being punished, without being judged, without being, diminished in some way, without being scorned, right? Without being guilt-tripped. So very often we build this strong core and this strong shield around us. It's almost like we're bulldozering through life. And one of the things where I'm seeing this so popping up so much is this, very pushy, forced, masculine way of promoting yourself, what you can do, and this is, these are the results I can get, and this is all the stuff that I learned, right? We're like putting up all this facade in order to prove ourselves worthy of being the leaders, prove ourselves worthy of being the healers and the caretakers and the teachers. And again, when we are in that forward masculine energy, it's very difficult to be in the feminine of actually receiving. And so what I'm seeing a lot of women go through, and maybe you've seen this in your clients as well, the clients who jump from program to program to program because they're actually just wanting to fix things, and they want to fix everything, right? And sometimes it goes to such an obsession that they want to literally fixate on themselves, on all the limiting beliefs that they have, on all the stuff that they have, and they're actually just in that forward running motion without ever bringing homeostasis into their body, because the forward masculine energy actually puts you off scale, specifically for women. If they're doing, if they're running on that survival mechanism for most of the day and most of their lives, it just becomes such an automation that they don't even realize that they're just in that, frantically forward moving, tracing bulldozer action of, I'm going to do this program, I'm going to sign up with this person. And it's like they're signing up to all the things, but they're not actually landing the results, because the intention and the, hello, beautiful, the intention with which they're actually moving forward is, I want to fix all of the stuff here in the room, right? And so that again is something that you might have noticed within yourself, and I was definitely caught up in that, and it's only been clicking for the past few years when I've really started to embody the feminine essence more, where I realized, holy smokes, I've been like on these program runs, I've been on this marathon run of like buying program after program after program, and actually never really receiving the help that I needed, which was to work with a mentor one-on-one, to work with a psychotherapist one-on-one, because there was a fear, an inherent fear of being seen as vulnerable and actually breaking, right? And so maybe you've seen that pattern occurring, right? Maybe you've seen it, activated inside of you. And I just want you to take a deep breath in right here, right now, and just consider, what is it that you have, where you have been running in your forward masculine energy for your own healing and your own integration, but you're not actually seeing the results land because you're not allowing the full embodiment to take place, right? And this is sometimes how we can actually sign up for the help, but not actually receive the support that we really need, right? This is when we sign up for freebies instead of, going with that coach because, yeah, she does have that higher scale, but we know we would benefit so much from working with her. Or when we just keep buying books to learn more and, fill our heads up with information, when what we actually need is to work with a therapist who's going to help us with our unique psychology and our own unique blueprint, right? So this is really how we can push away and, delay and sometimes even re-traumatize ourselves, right? Because then we pick up all this information and we're just on overload all the time, right? And then we use that overload and we go and dump it on everybody else, right? Which is, yeah. So another thing that might be showing up for you is guilt, right? And this is something that, is such a big red flag. Guilt, like, buyer's remorse is something that could be showing up. So I had a client recently who told me that she signed up with, this financial business coach, and, and she just felt this buyer's remorse that, she didn't receive the ROI that she was expecting. And so therefore it was just a bad decision from the get-go, right? And so she was guilt tripping on herself that, the work that she did wasn't actually really fulfilling, the outcome that she wanted. And we really had to work through this, and we really dig deep. And when we dug deeper, we actually found out that this was a sabotage mechanism. The guilt always will show up because every time she would make a decision in the past, it was somewhat linked up with that guilt, right? Every time, she went for her desires as a child, or she wanted something and she didn't dare to express that, she would be shut off by, her mother telling her that, she would just get the cheaper stuff, right? And so this is sometimes how we can tie guilt into decisions that actually are aligned and are good for us, right? It's even though we're not necessarily seeing the results, right here, right now, it still might have been such a good decision for us because we've become another person once we said yes to something, right? And we went with it. But then it's like we dissociate. It's like we invest in something that is actually good for us, and even though it might not be showing the results, like we know in the moment when we decided this was the right thing, but then the guilt will come in as a sabotage mechanism to not allow you to see that as a wise decision, right? And of course, this is so much deeper. I'm literally just giving you, the overview. But the guilt also sometimes not only ties back, to our childhood, it would also tie back to, teenage years or, school situations where, maybe we weren't as good in certain subjects. And this is something that really showed up for me, is that, I wasn't very good at math. So I would not even ask my parents to go there because I was afraid to feel the guilt right? Of asking for something that wasn't even affordable for them. And I didn't want it to be a burden on them. So, I stuck on the level of guilt in that sense, because I'd rather feel the guilt of not having what I wanted, right? Than, risk feeling guilty about receiving what I wanted and then, maybe not getting the results, meaning, have good grades in math, for example. So there's many ways on how this can really intersect and, fluctuate, where we're actually pushing and, pushing help and support away, where, again, this is when we actually have decided for something that's good for us, we attach it with another emotion just so we don't actually have to feel the responsibility of really owning the wealth and health and love and success that we desire so much, right? Okay. Then another one that will come up is the fear of disappointing others. So this kind of ties back a little bit with the shame that I talked about in the beginning, but I want to, bring that back in, because there's the whole, the full swing of really disappointing others. And this really comes again from this forward masculine coping mechanism that we've developed as girls, as young girls, that we have to be the caretakers, we have to be the responsible ones, we have to make our parents proud, we have to live up to all these expectations on the outside, right? And the fear of disappointing others for me really showed up in this way. So I have been in a really beautiful relationship for around 5 years, and then we broke up, and that's when I got entangled with this other man, which was a very toxic dynamic. And I could even tell you a whole tale about why it was toxic in the first place, because I was literally in my wounded masculine from the beginning, right? I wasn't even in my feminine, and it just clicked with me after many years on how the situation was placed up in the wrong way from the beginning. But I really want to talk to this fear of disappointing others. So for me, it was I had such an amazing relationship, and my parents and all my family, they had such an amazing connection with this other guy, right? And now I was in this new relationship that actually wasn't working. It was dysfunctional. And I had to live up to the expectation that this partner had to meet the exact same, or even make it better than the previous partner I had, because I'm coming up from an upbringing where it's even though my parents are very liberal and they're not putting as much pressure, but still there was this very heavy cultural how do I say it, cultural expectation that a woman should have only one partner, and she would get married with this partner, and she would have to be sure that her relationship and this marriage is going to work out. So during my whole 20s, literally, I lived up to these expectations that they weren't even real, but it's just something that I subliminally took on, because I imagined this is what my parents wanted, this is what my grandparents would have wanted, this is what my whole family is expecting of me, right? I've been always this girl who had everything she wanted, had good grades in school, went through my teaching diploma with amazing grades, moved to London, and put all this amazing life together, and now I'm in a dysfunctional relationship. This can't, I can't possibly reveal that. I can't possibly reveal that there's something not working about my life. And so I had this deep fear of disappointing my family, of disappointing people through my relationships, right? So it's I put up with suffering just so I didn't have to disappoint my parents. This is crazy, because my parents, they didn't even want this for me. They never said to me, Lizzie, we want you to be with one man and one man only, and that one man you choose, you have to stay with him for the rest of your life. But this is something that I lived up to out of my own fear of disappointing my family, that, I had to admit and showcase and display, well, actually, I've done the wrong choice. I've chosen the wrong man. We're not in alignment, right? And maybe we were in alignment for a moment, but we're no longer in alignment. And this is sometimes how this fear of disappointing others can sneak in from the back room where we're somewhat living up to expectations that it's like we build up this whole castle of expectations that other people might have about our lives, when in sometimes they're not even true. And even if they were true, they still wouldn't have, they shouldn't have that much weight on how you take decisions. So, it could be also what I see sometimes in my clients is they will come to me, but they will not go to like an official psychotherapist, because that's something they would never be able to tell their parents. They could tell their parents that, it's okay to go and see a psychic or an energy healer, but going to an actual psychotherapist, it will question everybody on the chain of the educational system, right? So sometimes this can really sneak up through the back door, where we're actually like, that's why I'm saying these emotions conceal subliminal sabotage mechanisms. They're subliminal, meaning they're not obvious. It's not an obvious choice. Sometimes it takes us many years to excavate that, and often it takes us way too long because we're not going and seeking the right counselors, or the right therapists, or the right people, the right professionals to work with, right? And so I've sent many of my own clients to go and actually seek psychotherapy support, because we come up to a certain threshold where I can't step any longer. They actually need to orientate their own level of growth with someone else by their side, and I will never shy away from that. So another thing, and this is like, I left the best for the last, is to be enthralled in the rescuer syndrome. And this is sometimes because we really feel that it is the right thing to do it in this way. And we're so enthralled in the rescuer syndrome that we will take care of everyone. We will literally waste our life's worth into this, right, of taking care of everybody else but not of ourselves. And this is, again, this conditioning that we have taken on. But I'm coming into this with another spin, because sometimes that being enthralled in the rescue mode could actually even set up a whole career change for ourselves, where we're building we're having education on a certain subject, and suddenly, we're getting enthralled in this rescue syndrome, and we're staying in career choices that are not even for us, right? They're actually there because it allows us to project our own energy, to project our own forward masculine energy, right? And so this being enthralled in the rescuer mode definitely was active for me when I was still pushing away my own problems, right? And pushing away the fact that I really needed support and help, and I needed to work on something much deeper, to such an extent that I would sometimes, organize whole afternoons with girlfriends, and, I would literally almost like psychologically support every single one of them. And I would get out to the end of the day and I was totally wiped out. And, I would go to bed crying because I was actually, fully entangled myself in something that I couldn't help myself with, right? So helping others was a way of distracting me from the actual pain that I was in. And I see this popping up with so many, healers and spiritual leaders, that they are so entangled in their own way of helping and rescuing and supporting others that they won't take care of themselves, right? They won't actually do the work themselves. And then they wonder, why they're not actually making money anymore. Well, very often it's because your clients have already sensed that you're not being authentic. You're not really, even though this might not be something they would ever say to you, but there's something off, right, with them. Because they feel that there's something off with your own energy, right? You're coming in as in the rescuer syndrome, and that in and of itself actually brings up the victim and someone who also experienced, trauma. So very often we get entangled and enthralled in that rescuer syndrome so much that, we're not seeing what we really need, right? And this really comes in as a concealing emotion, because we feel so right, we feel so worthy, we feel so empowered in that role, when actually we're just entertaining our own time, right? We're just, distracting our own time of taking care of everybody else rather than taking care of ourselves. So please let me know how this lands for you. Was there any of these patterns that you spotted within yourself? Did you feel that there was any any of these patterns that showed up? And maybe you have some questions as well. Like, I would love to just continue this conversation either today here in the live if you're watching, or if you're tuning in at a later time. You can just pop your thoughts and your experiences in the chat box, and I will come and swing back around and answer. I really feel that this is such an important conversation to have. We sometimes really do delay the help and support that we would just bring us along so much quicker, right? It would really support us to have beautiful relationship dynamics, not only with other people, but also with ourselves, with our clients. And this is really how I feel all businesses thrive. This is how I feel that all our lives can really turn into masterpieces and really elevate our consciousness to a point where, we don't have to do the work because we have to fix ourselves, but we can just do the work that is necessary and keep walking, right? So I hope this felt empowering. I know it was quite of a, deep and like sort of subliminal psychological topic, and sometimes it's a little hard to grasp, but I did my best to try to go into these different topics, because I do feel that they are relevant. They are relevant for ourselves. They're relevant for the communities we've touched. They're just so relevant for all the generations to come, right? Like, if we've chosen to be here in this life, it's actually because there's something in alignment with who we really are, right? There's something in alignment with who we are becoming in this exact moment in time in history. And for us to actually have access to so much information, to have access to education, it really is a privilege. Like, there's so many women who don't have this in the world, and I feel that we're the ones really stirring and leading the conversation in the right direction if we desire it to, right? We can become the leaders of the future today by bringing up conversations and discussing topics that are maybe not so mainstream, right? Where we really go much deeper into the layers and the blueprints. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited that we got to have this time together, and I can't wait to hear what your impressions were. If you felt the resonance with this, if you've seen this within yourself, if you've seen this in the women surrounding you or your clients, I would really love to know. Sending you lots of love, and have a beautiful day.